Good morning. A fallen leader lies in state at the Vatican. Pope John Paul II's body is on display for Catholic officials and the diplomatic corps today, Sunday, April 3rd, 2005.
From NBC News, this is a special edition of Today, the death of Pope John Paul II. With Katie Couric and Matt Lauer, live from the Vatican.
And good morning, everyone. Welcome to Today on a Sunday morning, another special edition and split edition of our program. I'm Matt Lauer in Vatican City, and Katie is back in Studio 1A in New York City. Katie, good morning to you.
Matt, good morning to you. I know the Pope's body will go on display at St. Peter's Basilica tomorrow, but I don't think anyone expected this private viewing to take place so soon.
No, that's right. It was a bit of a surprise. Again, this is a viewing, for lack of a better expression, for VIPs within the church and politicians here in Italy. The public viewing, the public viewing of Pope John Paul II's body will be tomorrow afternoon inside St. Peter's Basilica. The Pope's body was dressed in crimson vestments. His head was covered with a white bishop's mitre. Top church officials, as well as Italy's president and Prime Minister Berlusconi, were there to pay their respects. And then an extraordinary sight earlier this morning, tens of thousands of people packed St. Peter's Square for a mass celebrating Pope John Paul II's life on this first Sunday after Easter. And many mourners remain in the square even as we go on the air right now. And today, by the way, was an important day for the pontiff. It was, or is, Divine Mercy Sunday in memory of a fellow Pole. Katie, back to you.
And Matt, meanwhile, in this country, the faithful are packing churches nationwide, paying their respects to the people's Pope. And while hearts are certainly heavy all around the world, so many people are also celebrating the life of this incredibly charismatic and influential leader, Matt.
They certainly are. People are mourning everywhere. And coming up, we're going to take a look back at the remarkable events of the past 24 hours. We'll also talk to one American cardinal and find out what issues the church will face as leaders choose their next leader. And are there any frontrunners? We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll also take you behind closed doors for a rare look inside the Vatican. Katie?
Matt, Pope John Paul II was 84 years old when he died, but he was certainly young at heart. And this morning we're going to have more on the special touch he had when it came to the world's youth. And we'll also talk with a man who grew up with him in Poland, and they remained friends until the very end, Matt.
All right, Katie, thanks. But first, we want to turn to NBC's Campbell Brown, who can look back over the last 24 hours and perhaps give us a look ahead as well. Campbell, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. Well, they are mourning here in the city of Rome as they are mourning all over the world. As you mentioned earlier, in the Apostolic Palace, the Pope's body lies in state, and right now those closest to him are paying their respects.
Top church officials and Vatican staff filed past his body. The Pope dressed in crimson vestments, a simple crucifix hanging above his head. Outside in St. Peter's Square, an overflow crowd. Thousands gathered for morning mass, praise from world.
And the viewing for the public will begin tomorrow afternoon when the Pope's body will be moved to the Basilica of St. Peter's. The funeral, by church tradition, Matt, set to begin, or take place rather, between the 4th and 6th day after his death. We are still waiting to hear from the Vatican as to exactly when that will happen. Matt?
Campbell, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're going to have much more ahead from Vatican City, but right now let's go back to New York and Katie.
Okay, Matt, thank you so much. Catholics back here in the United States are remembering the Pope at masses nationwide today. NBC's Lester Holt is at St. Patrick's Cathedral here in New York City. Lester, good morning.
Katie, good morning. Catholics certainly believe that Pope John Paul II is in a better place this morning in life. His mantra, of course, was do not be afraid. And those teaching and those words, certainly words of comfort to ease the pain of Catholics as they file into the pews of churches across this country, dealing and coping with Saturday's sad news. Mass just getting underway now at St. Patrick's Cathedral here in New York. Let's go back to Matt now in Vatican City. Matt?
All right, Lester, thank you very much. While the faithful around the world viewed Pope John Paul II as part of their family, for people in Poland, the Pope's passing was truly like a death in the family. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell is standing by for us live in Krakow, where the Pope began his religious journey. Kelly, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. And today across Poland, a sentiment is being openly expressed, a desire that John Paul could make one more journey home for burial. Although people recognize that will likely happen at the Vatican, they do talk about the possibility. Did he make some special provision not yet publicly known? That's more evidence of the deep bond rooted here. In Krakow, the city where John Paul became a parish priest so long ago, his legacy fills the churches. In seemingly all the world's languages, words of prayer and praise are spoken for him. Emotions deep and convictions held dear. For many, grief gives way to celebration of a life well lived. From Spain to Asia to France, the symbols are shared, the light of candles, the lifting of hearts.
The passing of such a figurehead such as the Pope.
Katie?
All right, Kelly O'Donnell, thank you so much. Meanwhile, Cardinal Francis George from Chicago is one of the 117 cardinals from all around the world who will soon convene at the Vatican to choose the next pope. Cardinal George, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Katie.
I know it's been less than 24 hours since the world heard the news of the Pope's passing. As a cardinal of a city that has, I guess, approximately 2 million Catholics, how has Chicago been responding to the Pope's death?
I think much as people have responded elsewhere, with a great sense of sadness and loss, but also, in the case of Catholics, the conviction that love is stronger than death, and that there still is a strong bond of unity that keeps us united across the divisions of death with the Pope and with the Christ who gives us all new life. In Chicago particularly, there are many Poles. This is a major city of Polonia. He was here many times before he was Pope and once since his election, and so the personal bonds are strong here.
Meanwhile, on Friday night, as word of the Pope's deteriorating health spread, I know that you held a Mass at Chicago's Holy Name Cathedral.
Are there any front-runners? Newsweek magazine's Paris bureau chief is Christopher Dickey. He's been covering the Vatican for many years. Chris, good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Matt.
These cardinals are somewhat of a diverse group. I mean, philosophically, they may have some of the same beliefs, but in age, geographically, they come from many different regions of the world. How's that going to impact their decision?
Well, it's going to be a very different college of cardinals than we've ever seen before. First of all, there are not nearly as many Italians as there used to be. There are only 17 out of 117 who'll be voting are Italian. Most of these were appointed by Pope John Paul II, and he purposely reached out.
Thanks for spending time with us this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
And now, let's go back to New York and Katie.
All right, thanks a lot. It's me, actually, Matt, but no, that's all right. Thank you so much. We have other news to get to this morning, including this story. At least 44 U.S. troops have been wounded in an attack at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. Insurgents launched the attack after sunset on Saturday, detonating 2 car bombs and firing rockets at the prison. U.S. forces returned fire. The gunfight lasted about 40 minutes. No inmates escaped, but 12 were among the wounded. An Australian helicopter on a relief mission, an earthquake relief mission in Indonesia, crashed on Saturday, killing at least 9 people. The 2 crew members who did survive are in serious condition today. The death toll in the quake is now more than 500. Syria, we have word today, will complete its withdrawal of U.S. and military equipment from Lebanon by the end of this month. That word comes from a United Nations envoy. Terry Schiavo's remains have been cremated. Her husband, Michael, now plans to bury the ashes in Pennsylvania and must, by court order, tell her parents where that will happen. Heavy rain soaked the East Coast on Saturday, causing floods in some areas. In parts of Philadelphia, roads were underwater, making driving difficult and dangerous. Flood watches and warnings are in place from New Jersey to Rhode Island today. You're up to date on the top stories of the morning. It is now 8:17. Let's now turn to Katie and Al.
All right, Ann, thank you so much. And Mr. Roker's here with a quick check of the weather.
That's right, still a mess here in the Northeast and the Northwest as well. Let's check it out. Show you that storm system Ann was telling you about now moving up into New England, but it's also bringing some snow into parts of western New York and Pennsylvania. How much snow? Well, we still could see from Buffalo down into Pittsburgh about 3 to 5 inches of snow before it's all over. Heavier rain north and west, and then in the Northwest, course, we're expecting to see more heavy rain working its way into the Pacific Northwest with some snow there as well. That's what's going on around the country. Here's what's happening in your neck of weather. Matt?
All right, Al, thank you very much. We're back here in Vatican City for this special edition of Today on a Sunday as we remember Pope John Paul II. Cardinals from all around the world, as well as pilgrims and scores of world leaders, are about to come here to honor the man who was known as the People's Pope. And preparations for the funeral are already underway. Keith Miller's been keeping track of all that. He joins us now. Keith, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. Well, indeed, the rituals that serve this church when it is between popes are already in full circle, with the first being the most important, is honoring the memory of Pope John Paul II. The other is maintaining the continuity of this 2,000-year-old institution. They're sitting their way to Rome. The ceremonies that we will witness here, Matt, is going to be very important for the church, not just as an institution, but to offer some comfort during a time of tremendous grief. Matt?
All right, Keith, thank you very much. And we're going to have much more ahead on a special edition from Vatican City and New York as we continue to look at the life and the legacy of Pope John Paul II. But first, these messages.
More from Vatican City and New York, but first, your local news.
Katie, good morning to you. The Vatican released the official death certificate for the Pope today, saying the Pope died of septic shock and cardiocirculatory collapse. His death really hit home, I think, when his body was placed in state, lying in state in a salon or a hall for church leaders to pass by and many politicians as well. The Pope will lie in state beginning tomorrow afternoon behind me in St. Peter's Basilica. Thousands have been flowing through Vatican City today. A mass was held, as you've heard, a little bit earlier. It was an emotional sight. Most people there with tears in their eyes. The Italian press, by the way, is also paying tribute to the Pope today, Katie. I have a sampling of some of the Italian papers with me right here. This is the official paper of the Vatican, and the headline says, today, Saturday, April 2nd, at the hour of 9:37 p.m., the Lord has called him the Holy Father, John Paul II. And then on the back, there is this picture of the Pope with the saying, "Be not afraid," which, of course, was one of his signature statements. La Repubblica, another of the Italian papers today, says goodbye, Wojtyła. La Stampa has the headline here that says, "The world cries for the Pope." And Il Messaggero has a headline that simply says, "The Pope of everyone." Katie, a lot of emotion, a lot of reaction in the Italian press this morning.
It's so moving to see those faces of the people gathered in St. Peter's Square. And obviously, Matt, this story is dominating the headlines and the front pages on newspapers all across this country as well. Meanwhile, in churches around the United States, tears, prayers, and memories of a pope who visited this country 7 times during his papacy, more than any other pontiff. He also made it part of his mission to reach out to young Catholics in the world. We're going to take a look at the impact he made. We also have a wonderful story of a man who was a boyhood friend of Karol Wojtyła in Poland and stayed in touch with him after he became Pope John Paul II. Matt?
All right, Katie, thanks. First, let's get the latest from St. Peter's Square, and for that, we throw down to Campbell Brown. Campbell?
Good morning again, Matt. Here on the streets outside.
Tom Cameron Crazy.
Brett Huntley.
David Brainerd.
John Chen.
Tom Brokaw.
Prayer